знаете, после того, как холодная война закончилась,
after the Cold War ended, there was a chance to overcome this bloc thinking and the bloc politics. I can repeat it. After the Cold War came to an end, there was a chance to overcome the bloc mentality and the bloc politics. However, as I mentioned in my statement, I'm quite sure that the US simply didn't need that. It seems that they were possibly scared that they would lose control over Europe. They wanted to maintain it, and they're still doing so. Moreover, they strengthened their grip over it. But I wanted to say that at some point, it would lead to the weakening of that principle of complete subjugation. You know, what I'm saying right now is not anything bad. I don't want to, blame someone or anything, God forbid. But we see that many European countries, most of European countries that are NATO members, to the detriment of their interests, are conducting actions that benefit the US politics and the US economy. Well, look, the US, in certain states of the US, the energy costs 3 or 5 times less than in the European Union. So the decision is being made deliberately in the tax system. They're decreasing the revenue tax. For example, they create the conditions for the transition of whole sectors of economy, of whole industries towards the US, and some of them do move. First, that applied to those who were dealing with primary energy sources, that is, fertilizer productions as well as glass production and some other industries. They simply rolled back their activity because it was not profitable anymore. They're moving over the ocean. Now they're doing the secondary industries. More or less, it has to do with metallurgy and the car industry and so on. The governments can blame all they want, the ineffective management of the companies, of specific companies, but it has to do with the government policy, first and foremost. And in those conditions, the management of the companies had to do something to defend, to protect jobs and their companies. But it's not always possible, though. Therefore, the conflict that unfortunately we're seeing today, that we're unfortunately taking part in, that allowed the US, to achieve the strengthening of their leadership, to put it mildly, have almost a colonial dependence of the countries. Honestly, even I didn't expect that. The same is happening to Japan. It's surprising. What did we do to Japan? Nothing. Not a single step, not a single word. But they introduced sanctions against it. How come? Where did that come from? Hence the question, what do we do with that? Well, we didn't do anything. Are there colleagues from Japan? Possibly there would be some questions from them. And it's even worse with Europe. I have already said it, but I will not refrain from the pleasure of thinking back to my conversation in 1993 with ex-Chancellor Kohl. I had the chance to be present at the conversation with a former mayor of St. Petersburg. Back in the day, I still had some German in me, and I acted as an interpreter between them. He let go of the interpreter and he said, "Go and take a rest." I stayed and I interpreted for them. For me, as who was a former member of external intelligence of the Soviet Union, it was so surprising to hear what he was saying. To be honest, I was listening to them, I was interpreting. And to put it mildly, I was extremely surprised. Because I still had cliches of the Cold War mentality in my head. I was a member of intelligence of KGB, of USSR, and all of a sudden, Chancellor Kohl started saying that the future of Europe, if it wants to preserve itself as an independent center of European civilization, the future is only with Russia. We need to bring together our efforts. I I was simply agape. He continued in the same vein, and he spoke about his vision about the development of situation on the American continent, the way the U.S. will continue build its policy. Well, I will not give it verbatim. Well, he didn't say anything bad about the U.S., but he simply gave his expert opinion, not just a chancellor, but more like an expert. And in essence, I think 85 or 90% what he spoke about is happening. I can see it, and everyone can see it as well. And naturally, we should try to build a security system on Eurasian continent. It's tremendous in size. And naturally, Europe can, and I believe should be, a part and parcel of that system. I jotted it down. The PRC does not have a chance and doesn't want to play a dominating role. You said you spoke about Central Asia as well, and I will mention it too. I think there are certainly our friends from China here. The Chinese philosophy does not have that. They do not strive for domination. That's the trick. That's the attraction of the theory, of that proposal that has been worded by President Xi. One belt, one road. One belt, one common road. This is not a Chinese road. This is a common road. Everyone's road, at least bilaterally. That's the way it sounds, and that's the way we behave, in the interests of each other. What's happening in Central Asia? Everyone expected some kind of a clash or collision between Russia and China in Central Asia. Well, look, the thing is that these countries are very young in their statehood, and they have economies that requires significant development. Demographic processes are afoot there. For example, take Uzbekistan. Every year, they add another million of population. Can you imagine that? 27 or 28 million, that's already the population, and they have an extra million born each year. India has plus 10, as my friend Prime Minister Modi spoke, but India has 1.5 billion people living there. And Uzbekistan has about 38. Now they soon have to have 40 million. That's a lot of millions. They have plenty of issues. And if the People's Republic of China comes over there and helps out those economies, and that means that as a result of economic cooperation, the domestic political processes stabilize as well. The statehood is stabilized. Russia only has an interest in that. We want to have a stable situation there, stable development. It's in our interests as well. Therefore, the competition is absent there. We only have cooperation. It doesn't stand in the way of development of our traditional development of ties with that region of the world. And the countries of Central Asia that for hundreds of years have been part of the Russian Empire and of the Soviet Union not only remember well, but they cherish our special contacts and special ties. And it benefits everyone. And if we create a security system in the Eurasian continent, and incidentally, I see and I hear that certain European countries are starting to talk about the single security system from Lisbon to Vladivostok yet again. Now they are going back to what de Gaulle spoke about. He talked about Urals, but we need to talk about Vladivostok as the end point. They have these ideas again. If our counterparts will go back to that, and most importantly, as you said, what I've mentioned and what's written down in the OSCE documentation, that the security of one country does not come at the expense of the other of security of the other country. It's crucial. If we can truly do that, you have mentioned the level of trust that needs to be increased, and I think that the most important issue on Eurasian continent between Russia and the European countries is the deficit of trust. You can blame Russia for many things, and possibly we make mistakes as well. But when we're being told that we signed the Minsk agreement, we're being told that they signed the Minsk agreements only to give time to Ukraine to rearm, and they never intended to solve this conflict peacefully. How can we trust them? Look, guys, what kind of trust can we talk about? You've publicly said that you've fooled us, that you've lied to us, and you deceived us. What kind of trust are we talking about? But we need to go back to that system of mutual trust. With time, I don't know, we can discuss it till early hours of the morning, but it's the first step to create a single Eurasian security system. Is it possible or no? Chancellor Kohl, whom I spoke about at the beginning, said that it's not just necessary, but it's an imperative, and I share his point of view.
And what about the future president? Well, you can have any attitude toward him, because during his first iteration as president, he was dubbed as mostly a businessman, that he is not very well versed in politics. He can make a lot of mistakes. But from the outset, I can tell you that his behavior when there was an attempt on his life, I was impressed. He's a courageous person. And it's not just about the hand he raised and his call to fight for their common values and ideals. Of course, there was a rush of adrenaline, but a person shows their true color in these emergencies. And this is precisely one of those cases, and I think he acquitted himself admirably in a valiant fashion as a man. As far as politics is concerned, I don't know, during his first presidency, I don't know whether he's going to hear that, but I think I'm going to say that regardless. I think he was harassed by everyone on all sides, bullied. He was afraid of making a step to the left or to the right, saying the wrong thing. I don't know what's going to happen right now during his new presidency, because this is going to be his last presidency. Whatever he does, it's up to him to decide. But what he's been saying publicly up until now, I would be loath to comment on what was said during the electoral campaign, because, that was a deliberate thing to fight for votes. But regardless, what he said about his desire to rebuild relations with Russia, to facilitate an end to the Ukrainian crisis, I think this deserves attention at the very least, and I would like to take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on his election as President of the United States. As I said before, we're going to work with any head of state that is going to garner the trust of the American people, and this is what's going to happen in trust. As for relations between Russia and the People's Republic of China, these relations are at an unprecedentedly high level. These relations are built upon mutual trust. This is something we are lacking in our relations with certain countries, primarily with the Western countries, and I've spoken about the reasons for that already. I'm aware that if the representatives of those countries that I'm criticizing were here, they would give me a list of their grievances with Russia. But, well, we're not going to have a discussion right now on this subject, but I would like to say that the level of trust between Russia and China is at the highest level in modern history. This, as well as our personal friendly relations with President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China, serve as the sure foundation for the development of intergovernmental ties. I'm not going to go into detail, but our bilateral trade is $240 billion, probably not the biggest, but still ranks among the first biggest 4 trade partners of China. This is a very good result already. And this is a very important factor. And we are hugely complementary. We started with energy, nuclear energy, and as our technological capacities are growing, we have an exchange of these technologies, and this significance is only growing. That is why we're expanding our cooperation. It's becoming increasingly wide. The spectrum is also expanding, and we are paying increasingly great attention to high technology in different spheres. China has made a huge headway and achieved a lot in different spheres. I spoke publicly on the subject. According to our experts, the economic development model China has chosen is something it arrived at in a natural fashion based on the requirements of life, and it's more efficient than many other economic models because this model combines planned economy and market economy, and thanks to this model, Chinese experts are successful. And the political leadership manages not to build barriers in the way of what the economic specialists are doing. And they're doing a very good job together. China's economy is performing more efficiently than other economies. It's true that we are seeing a certain adjustment in terms of economic growth. Regrettably, the US is pursuing a policy of double constraint. It's trying to constrain both Russia and China. What's the point of fighting a two-front war? Basically, I do not understand that, but they believe that the economic ascendant of China is a threat to their economic dominance. But personally, I think if they want to be efficient, they should choose other methods to achieve these goals. Rather, they should show their advantages in a competitive rivalry. This should be fair competition, and this would create better opportunities in the US. Instead, they are introducing bans and prohibitions, which in the end comes back to deal a blow to their own economy. Say the ban on Chinese goods or the use of Chinese technologies in the American market. This will only result in inflation and in higher prices. That's going to be the end result of that. As far as our cooperation is concerned, there are certain industries and spheres where they're trying to constrain China. But in that case, we could be complementary, the economies of our two countries. As I said, we started in energy, and our energy cooperation is developing rapidly in oil, gas, and nuclear technologies. We're quite active in building new units for NPPs. We also organize supplies of oil and gas, and this creates a sure-proof, a foolproof system for ensuring China's energy security. We have a contiguous border. Nothing can throw a screw in that, neither storms, no lanes of communication. Nothing can undermine our cooperation because we've got a common border, and the supplies will continue just as they have been going. There is a guarantee of that. I believe that if the US chose a different path, a different attitude towards China and Russia, so if they chose a policy of trilateral cooperation instead of double constraint, then everyone would stand to win.
Вы знаете, ведь...
You know, we never refuse to continue the dialogue on strategic stability. However, it's an open secret, and everyone knows it, not only this audience, but around the world. It is well known that the United States and their satellites, there is no other way to put it, regarding the leadership of those countries who, to the detriment of their interests, follow the path towards Russia proposed from over the ocean. Then the US state the goal for themselves to deliver a strategic defeat to Russia. A strategic defeat. What is a strategic defeat? What is to achieve a strategic defeat of a specific country? If not annihilate this country, then I don't know, to bring the role of the country, to reduce it to a naught. Why would we need the nuclear weapons then? At the same time, they want to have a dialogue on strategic stability with us. How come? Well, how does it work? It seems that they're normal and grown-up people. We're prepared to have this dialogue, but in the current conditions, there are many issues. And your colleague from China just asked us about the triangle of Russia, China, and the US. I deliberately didn't want to go into detail and exacerbate it, and I didn't talk about the international security regarding that question. Cooperation between Russia and China is one of the most important factors of international stability in general, but it has to do with strategic stability in nuclear weapons as well. In the past, we were always being whispered to, talk to your friends from China. They should join the conversation about decrease of their nuclear arsenals, and our Chinese friends responded, guys, look, we have less delivery vehicles, we have less nuclear warheads, you should cut it down to our level, or we can grow up to your level. Otherwise, there should be no discussion about the cut-downs, right? That's very reasonable, and the rest of it is just nonsense. At the same time, there are nuclear arsenals of other NATO countries beside the US, the United Kingdom and France. They have increased in their nuclear arsenals. They are not only increasing in numbers, but also changing in quality. Quite recently, I was being told that NATO is not a military and political alliance. This is primarily a political alliance, and the military is on the back burner. Not quite so. Indeed, the US deliberately, maybe not, but I think deliberately, have brought back the military component of NATO. And they have declared that they're going to deliver a strategic defeat to Russia. Naturally, we should consider the nuclear arsenals of the UK and France as well. As of today, this is a complex issue. It's more complex than it used to be 20 or 30 years ago. However, we are aware of our responsibility as a country which has the capacity in terms of delivery vehicles and warheads and the quality of modern weapons, and it's being improved domestically. Right now, we're coming to a point that would put on combat duty our novel developments that I spoke about 5 years ago. We're finalizing the tests, and we understand that. And we're prepared for the dialogue, but the other side needs to be honest about this dialogue, considering all aspects of our relations. It cannot be that they want to defeat us strategically, but to their citizens that they're telling, this is business as usual, don't worry about anything. It doesn't work like that. Strategic defeat for us, and they should not worry? No. Let's open our cards and have a calm and business-like conversation without double, triple, quadruple standards. Let's just talk about it. And we have proposed that multiple times. But when talking about the specifics, it causes a pause on the other side. We'll see the way the way the proposals are worded by the new administration, if they do so. We never wanted to abandon dollar, and that's not our commitment. The political and financial authorities of the US or of Europe are doing it themselves. When they decline to put through European settlements, euro is still in fledgling state, but they limited its capacity by their own hand. It's nonsense. As for Europe, the issue lies in the fact that the decisions in economy are done by politicians who, quite often, unfortunately for those countries, are not experts in economics and finance. And that is only to the disadvantage of those countries. We are not abandoning dollar in Russia, where they simply refuses to allow to use dollar as a settlement tool. Well, even so, I think if we are denied that, it's so foolish of the US authorities, because the dollar is the pillar of US power, and they're undoing it by their own hand. I thought that whatever happens, dollar is like a sacred cow. It should not be touched. It's in discontinuation. The udder is dirty. They got rid of the horns. Well, they're to blame on their own. The payments in dollars are decreasing. Not too much as of yet, but as means of savings, it's going down step by step, very gradually. It's shrinking, but it's a trend. It's their own doing. But we're not fighting against it. Our proposals are not aimed against dollar. This is simply us rising to the challenge of modern times, a response towards the development of economy. We're thinking about the future tools. And what's relevant today is what I've said before, creation of a system, using already the groundwork of the systems in each country, exchanging of financial information, and those tools that I've mentioned will develop them. Thank you.
Что касается того, что мы видели.
Well, as for what we saw at the opening ceremony, honestly, I didn't watch it. Someone told me afterwards, and I did give it a watch. I don't know what they were gonna do, what they wanted, why the organizers chose that, and why it was greenlit by the International Olympic Committee. It was an insult to millions of Christians, of believers. Why there is a need to insult anyone, I do not quite see that. Why there is a need to insult the sentiments of Christians. Those who organized that say they didn't want to insult anyone, but the same happens with regard to the Islamic community when the Quran is being burnt, or when there are some illustrations or caricatures with the Prophet, and when such things are being published under the aegis and pretext of protecting freedom of speech. Well, I'm just repeating what I have spoken about on multiple occasions, because the freedom of one person or society and where the freedom of other persons starts. Because, you know, you can insult someone and religious feelings of other people and say, this is my freedom, but this would lead you as far as to, I don't know, murder someone. Because if you want to murder, is it gonna be like encroaching on your freedom? Well, of course, that is nonsense. People do not feel the line, the border, as they say. They have a vision and they do not know where the boundaries lie. Yes, if you have a vision, it's all right. But if you know that this vision of yours might insult other person, you should refrain from going public. The rule is as simple as that. They believe it possible to act in such a fashion. incidentally, the same goes for the opportunity for men to compete in women's sports. It simply destroys women's opportunities. Well, I'm sorry for broaching this subject. Maybe there are some sports which are not for women. I'm sorry, I do not want to insult anyone, but women should compete with women. Well, yes, there is box, and maybe that's a male sport. But, if you declare that you're a woman and then you go and you break a nose of a woman, it simply destroys women's sports because women will have no chance of competing. Men should compete with men. And if you're a man and you declare yourself a woman, you should compete with similar people. Or, it's like those who get a medical certificate, say that they have an illness and they take a medicine and they have an unfair advantage. Well, you can organize, again, a competition among people who use the same method. This is only natural and this is not going to insult anyone. No one is going to be offended by that, I think. Now, as far as protecting our values is concerned, I think we should use any means at our disposal to protect these values.
Thank you. My name is Wang Wen from Chongyang Institute, Liming University of China. I'm so glad to see you again. And my question is about Russia's China policy in the coming 4 years, as well as the future international system changes. Because we know Trump is back. Let me imagine if one day President Trump call you and ask that, like that, let's join forces to contain China. What will you respond? And will you accept President Trump's suggestion, so-called uniting with Russia and resisting China? And my second question is about the future's international system change, because you often mentioned that international system is ongoing fundamental change. So in your eyes, what will the international order and framework in the future looks like? And in your eyes, in the future international order and the system, what role should Russia, China, United States act or plan in the future? And how do you consider to coordinate the triangle relationship among Russia, China, and the United States? Thank you.
Well, I'll give it a try, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible. First, China and Russia are cooperating and being friends, not against anyone. Our relationship with China is not aimed at any third party, the US included. Our relation with the People's Republic of China seek to develop and create a favorable environment for ensuring the security of both our nations and peoples. And the same applies to our relations with the United States of America. It would be very difficult for me to even imagine a situation when the president-elect makes such an offer as you mentioned. I think he understands that it is completely divorced from the realities in which we are living. Russia is not going to ally with anyone against anyone. And it seems even increasingly unrealistic to me with regard to China, because with China we've reached an unprecedented level of trust, mutual confidence and friendship. I think such countries as Russia and China that have such a big border and such a long history of coexistence in one space, despite the differences in our cultures, which, however, do espouse similar and common values. I think that in itself is a great achievement, and we have to use it right now, and we have to reinforce it and pass it down to forthcoming generations. As far as the possibility for establish our relations with the US is concerned, we're open to these possibilities. To a large extent, the ball is in the US's court because we were not the ones to sour relations with them. We did not introduce any restrictions or sanctions against the US, nor are we facilitating any armed conflicts in the territories in their proximity. We've never sought anything like that, and I would like to say that we've never done anything like that in practice. We do not quite see why the US seems it has the right to do that, and we are hopeful that at the end they will come to realize that they'd better refrain from doing that, because that's what they should be doing if we do not want any global conflicts. But the president-elect of the US, President Trump, spoke along similar lines, so we'll live and see how it plays out in reality. Keeping in mind, of course, that such an institution as the presidency of the US is bound by certain obligations, by certain responsibilities. The president of the US is tied to a certain extent to those people who helped him arrive in power. You know, in the past, Jacques Chirac said, what kind of democracy can we talk about in the US? Because without a billion, if you don't have $1 billion US in the pocket, you shouldn't even entertain the thought of participating in the elections, let alone participate in practice. And those people who provide those billions, they participate in building the future team. And if they delegate someone, they have a lever for exerting influence upon those people who will be part of that team. So it's important to see whether the president-elect manages to build good relations with this so-called deep state and also build contacts and relations with the voters. If he keeps his promises, his authority is growing, and he can use that authority to become an independent political figure, even in his relations with those influence groups that help him arrive in power. It's a very complex process. What's going to happen in the US is something we cannot tell for sure, but I'm hopeful that our relations with the United States of America will be re-established at a certain point in time, and we are open to that. Thank you. Thank you.